Hello, friends. Welcome to the episode 47 of Human versus Human. Hope you guys are doing absolutely well. On this episode, I have a brilliant personality. She is Shilpi Kapoor, founder, BarrierBreak Solutions. Without much delay, let's welcome her on the show. Shilpi Kapoor, welcome to Suman versus Human.
Thank you for having me, Suman. It's a pleasure to be on the show with you.
Shilpi ji, we just want to know what the barriers you're trying to break. What is this barrier break about?
So, BarrierBreak is trying to break the biggest barrier that people with disabilities have today in accessing the digital content. Right. So, today, most of our world has become digital. It's very little of that we do is like in the past, we used to go to the bank to access our money. Today, we bank online. So, everything of life is kind of moved online. And somewhere in that journey, people with disabilities are being left behind. So we're trying to bridge that gap and help people understand how to help people with disabilities be able to use the same website that anybody else could use, the same mobile app that anybody else would use, the same OTT channel that anybody else would use. So we're looking at bridging that.
Okay, but the question is why the apps and applications are natively not accessible? Why we really need a person like you or a company like you to make them accessible? Why companies ignore it?
Well, I think the first problem out there is that our developers are not taught accessibility, Saman.
Mhm.
Right? If the people who are actually making these websites and applications are only just looking at, what somebody sees and doesn't really, they don't really understand the code of what it is to make something accessible. Right? So I'll give a very simple example of that.
Mm.
Um, every website has images on it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But most of them, those images don't have image descriptions.
yes.
Now, that is something that a developer has to go and put into the code. They have to go and write something called an alt text or an alt attribute,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Now, if a developer has never been taught that, how is he going to be able to build for that? It's like saying you're going to go and design a building, or but you've never ever, you don't know the basics of building a foundation.
correct.
And that's the first problem that we have. The second problem that we have, Suman,
Mm,
is that the companies need to go out and say, we want to build accessibly when they start even designing or even conceiving of a product,
mm,
right?
mm,
So it's a simple problem, right? Like how every company will tell a developer, ensure that this is responsive and can work on mobile devices.
mm.
Similarly, they should also go and say exactly the same thing. We need to ensure that our website or our mobile app is accessible as per the international standards. Right? And nobody says that. So accessibility is an afterthought today for most. Actually, very often I meet chief technology officers of companies, Suman,
Mm.
and you will be shocked that so many of them don't even know the word accessibility. And they're the ones who own all of this technology in these companies. They're just starting to learn it, right? That's our gap. And that is why we're struggling to build accessible technology right at the start.
And I'm proud to have you because you are one of those companies who are really, large in scale when it comes to making things accessible in this world, right?
Yes, we are. We do a reasonable job of doing this, yes.
Even then, there are millions of applications are still not accessible. Where is the gap? Is the gap with the company, or is the gap with the policy, or is the gap with the bandwidth and mileage you guys have?
I think we actually have policies in place. Internationally, we do today, right?
Mm,
Well, even if you say India, right, our Rights for Persons with Disabilities Act today
mm,
uh, does have a requirement that all ICT is accessible. All information and communication technology must be accessible, whether public or private.
okay.
Right? We also have a rule in India by which has been issued. right? That we have to ensure that these websites and mobile apps meet either guideline for Indian government's
Yeah.
standards, guideline for Indian government websites, or GIGW, or the IS 17802.
Hmm.
Okay. Now the gap is that we've got to get it into implementation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't believe, and I think globally we have enough legislation in the world,
Mhm.
right, as a whole.
Yeah.
It is our implementation which is lacking. Uh, and the problem today, I believe, is more with the tech world, where we are not implementing accessibility. We are not ensuring that we're delivering accessibly. So we have companies like Microsoft to look up to.
Yeah.
Right? Everything they build, they think of accessibility.
Okay.
Now, why is that not true of everybody else who's building technology? Today, even a bank is building technology. Today, even a retail store has technology. Right? So when they build, they need to remember accessibility. So I think what we really need is maybe a lawsuit, right? That because today the private sector does not necessarily believe that they are governed by these laws. And actually, there are no penalties, right?
Mhm.
So even if you say that something is not accessible, um, nothing's going to happen to that company or that organization.
I have seen many people, filing petitions in the courts against the private companies and government bodies in the country, India. But even then, I'm following those cases since quite a long time, years, but still, they are not taking it forward to make their product accessible. So it is because of their negligence. What do you feel about it?
So I think it is ignorance. I don't think it's negligence.
Mhm.
Okay? It's that assumption that people with disabilities are not their customers. Right? It is that assumption that people with disabilities need something totally separate, and thus it is very expensive. So we don't want to go down this road. We can't afford to do it.
Mhm.
Right? So I think that's where the catch is. It's ignorance. Right? I don't know anybody in the world who once you tell them or once you help them understand the problem, they will walk away. Yes, they might not be able to go, at the same pace that you and I would want them to implement accessibility. Because there might be budgetary concerns, there might be, certain timelines or certain milestones that they have to achieve, and there might be a pushback on accessibility. But today I honestly believe that people will do it. But the problem is the gap of ignorance. So even if I go and tell a CEO that, would you make your app accessible? And if he says yes, right? When he goes down to his product owner or his product manager, when his product manager doesn't know accessibility, and then when that person goes down to his developer and says, ensure you meet the web content accessibility guideline, and the person says, okay, I'll look up the internet and find two things and I'll implement it.
Mhm.
So it's ignorance. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think that these are the guidelines. We have to make learning accessibility easy. And we have to make them realize that it's not about them. People with disabilities is not them. It's us. Because today,
Mhm.
these are the same people who actually use Google Maps with auditory support.
Mhm.
Right. These are the same people who use pinch and zoom on their phone and magnify their WhatsApp message. Right. And these are the same people who are using captions when they're seeing an English show.
Yeah.
So I think everybody, once they realize that they are actually using accessibility, features themselves, that realization is a little more easier. So I think it's ignorance And it's about that separation that's been created over the years by society. If this is about them and not about us. And the moment you and I say this helps people with disabilities, they turn around and say, oh no, you know, we don't have them as customers. So I would prefer to look at it as ignorance than look at it as negligence.
So since you mentioned budgetary requirements, so is it really that expensive where, huge companies like Zomato, Swiggy, and even the big Ambanis and Adanis own companies like Jio discourage or, decline accessibility?
So it is not as expensive as everybody thinks, but yeah, there is a cost to implementing accessibility.
Is that cost really that high? Such companies like Jio, ignores?
Not at all. So you would know a disability, a disabled lawyer called Amar Jain,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And Amar reached out to me about, I think, 3 weeks back,
mm,
saying that a lot of the securities companies, financial security companies, are telling him that they cannot make a stock ticker accessible.
mm,
And I heard him out, and he said, what can you do to help?
mm,
So I said, well, I can make an open source stock ticker and put it out in GitHub, right? And if anybody needs more support, we'll be able to happy to help them, right? Uh, if I can do that, they can do it. How does that sound? And I'm a very small company in front of the ones that you talked about. Uh, so I think it is about going out and telling them, see this, it was so easy to do, right? If this can be done, then everything can be done. I don't think people realize that, even Google has accessibility inbuilt in it. I don't think people realize that Microsoft Office has accessibility built into it, right? So it's it's that. So I think we need to go out and tell people that if you really want to make technology which can be used globally, then don't ignore accessibility. And I think today every one of these companies wants to be called a global company. Not a single one of them wants to be only an Indian entity, I think. So I have hope, Suman. I really have hope.
because it upsets us a lot when you try to visit their website to do some serious work, and when you come to know that you need to depend on someone else, from some normal person, to get the thing done. And when you come to know that this company is huge, Reliance's feature, all these companies are big, but still I'm surprised, we are ignored. Now tell me, Shilpi, how many lives are affected due to inaccessibility?
I would say, or as per WHO, 15% of the world's population.
Oh my God, huge.
Humongous, 1.3 billion people as of today is the expected number. And that's humongous.
And how much percentage of the web resources are made accessible, approximately?
Not enough is the statement I would give. There's also a very interesting study which says that people with disabilities have a spending power or a buying power of, I think it is $13 trillion. I think it's time that they wake up and realize that people with disabilities and their families also have a buying power. And people with disabilities also, spend money on clothing, food, holidays, medicines, hospitals, travel, everything, right? So I think we need to show them that we exist. And people like you need to show them that you exist. And collectively, I'm yet 20 years in. I think I've been in this industry for 25 to 27 years. I yet I yet have to explain myself. And I'm sure you know that feeling very well.
Recently, I have spoken to 100 people,
Mhm.
100 blind people, and I asked them a question like, how do you recharge your mobile phone? So many of them have Geo numbers, and few of them have. Vodafone Idea. We often have Airtel. And everyone gave me one common answer that they use third-party applications like Google Pay or Phone Pay, something like that to recharge their mobile. I asked them, like, but it is not same with other person. Like the normal people, the normal guys visit the telco's website to recharge their phone. And these people, these 100 people told me that none of the telecom companies' websites in India are
I would not be surprised by that statement. Um, the problem is again the same. Telcos don't believe people with disabilities are their customers. It all boils down to one thing, right? Uh, they just don't believe.
why this is not the same case in countries like US, UK, and Australia.
So don't get me wrong, there are challenges there also, but the law is on the side of the people out there, right? So if a lawsuit is filed, right, um, and if they win, the kind of penalties that a company has to pay are humongous, right? So people don't want that, and it's not only the penalty; it's also your name, right? It's what you are recognized for, right? I remember one of the first few lawsuits all of us really talked about was the National Federation of the Blind against an organization called Target
Mm,
in the US.
mm.
And it's a very large retail chain,
Yes, yes,
right?
yes.
And that was one of those rulings that made everybody sit up and say, yes, we have to do something. Don't get me wrong, it's not that everything is accessible in the rest of the world,
Mm, mm.
but it is better than where we stand today in India for sure.
Since you said developers are not aware of all these things like accessibility and stuff like that. Now, when these developers sit in the school, class benches, why they are not thought about the WCAG and stuff like that, Shilpa, that surprises me because I feel this should be, I mean, not everything, but at least the basics of basics should be taught, right?
So, would you be shocked if I told you that the professors who teach these people don't know accessibility?
Seriously.
Seriously, that's our problem.
Why?
It was never taught to them.
So don't you think the problem have to be addressed from the root level, from the books?
I totally believe so. We've been asking the government to do something about it, um, and it's very difficult to get these kind of changes made. Um, See, today there is obviously a certain percentage of people that learn out of all of these education institutes. You've done your BSc, MCA, BTech, and you've learned
Hmm,
technology out there.
hmm,
Um, but there is so much which is even taught by organizations like NIIT and all, right?
hmm,
Uh, but we find that nobody wants to teach accessibility, right? And it's not a part of every curriculum, right? So actually, BarrierBreak has launched something called ACE Learning. It's currently in beta, and basically we are going to make accessibility learning easy for people by making it very bite-sized and small, right? So you can actually go onto ace.barrierbreak.com and it's a free subscription.
hmm,
And you can at least subscribe to get some of the learning for free. And then obviously we'll have a paid version, but we will try and give it, some amount for free so that people can build awareness and learn that they need to implement this. We will also work with certain nonprofits and see how we can get this information out to the right people, as well as talk to colleges and universities on how they can give this to their students. So we will have to do that if we want to address all of this. I had till now hoped, honestly, Suman, that the disability sector of the nonprofit sector would have taken on this challenge over the last 15 years. But since nobody did, we finally come back into that space because we always assumed that this was something that the sector would do. But since it hasn't, I think you're right. That is where we have to start from. And I'm actually even thinking we should create something which is for school education. Because imagine if our children learn how to make a Word file accessible in school or a PowerPoint accessible in school. Wouldn't that be cool?
Yes. Listeners, the link is in the description. I strongly request you to kindly go and check it out, have a look. And it's not just about going through the link and looking at the pages. I want you to seriously implement those things in your lives, and please share it to all those technical people or any student for that matter. Shilpi, now why did you choose this platform? Why did you come into Barrier Break? I mean, why are you doing this?
Well, I met a boss of mine who I had no clue was paralyzed. I worked with him for 2 years of my life, and I had no idea that he was paralyzed. I used to work with him virtually. I had never met the gentleman. I had only met him online. On that one day that I got a hacker's IP and he didn't, and I asked him, I said, how did I beat you to this? And he told me the only reason you could do this to me today was simply because my technology is not doing well. I'm waiting for a technician to come in and solve the problem of my computer. And then he told me he used something called a sip and puff device to control his computer. And I think that was the moment where I realized that I might have a calling out here. I don't know if you remember, but I started the first ever computer training center in India for the visually impaired. It was based in Mumbai, and that was the first ever center that was started in the country. And I loved doing what I was doing. But I soon realized that I didn't want to be a nonprofit. And I wanted to build something that would go beyond charity and that would do for people with disabilities because it should be done, not because I do a little because I feel bad for them. Right? And that's really the genesis of Barrier Break and what you see today. So I do what I do because I love doing it. I love breaking these barriers. I love creating a possibility where there isn't any. I am restricted, Suman, I must say, sometimes to building a sustainable organization because it is important for us to survive if we have to make this happen, right? And yeah, so that's why I do what I do, and that's why you see me here, and you've been seeing me here for the years that you've been seeing me.
Yes. And Shilpi, do you have any disability?
If I was to look at the Indian law, I don't have a disability in the strictest format of that. I don't even have anybody in my family, in my immediate family, who has a disability. It was this boss of mine who made me realize. But having said that, I have, if when anybody ever meets me, they might notice that I have a slight tremor in my hands. It's something called a familial tremor. I've inherited it, by birth. And it stops me from doing certain things, like opening a, a, a jar is not easy for me. Right? But as per the definition of disability in India, I probably am not disabled. But if you ask me, I'm surely impaired.
So you have no problem with your eyes.
No, I don't have any problem with my eyes.
It makes me feel so happy that people who are actually not blind, like you, Shilpi Kapoor, and also like Dipti Prasad, who is founder of Novaflix. And I've met many people, many normal people
Yes.
who are doing so much for the community, visually impaired community, blind community. This is really encouraging.
Well, I think we believe in the powers of the people, and at least I don't see a disability in someone. I don't see it in anybody. I only see what is a possibility. And I think once you start seeing that, it's very easy to do what we all do.
You are a boss. Now you have to talk to many clients all over the world globally. Now, when you talk to the client here in India and when you talk to the client who is sitting far away abroad in the US, what kind of mindset differences you notice when you try to convince them about accessibility, Shilpi?
Well, the difference out here is generally the first thought is this must be an NGO who's talking to me and it's about charity. That has yet not gone, Suman, 100%. Right? Um, I think that yet stays, and very often people tell us that we don't have CSR funds for this. So it comes from there. Um, Internationally, when we see it, very often it's about my customer has asked for this and I need it, from a compliance perspective. That's where it might start. And then you start to see companies take either of the two routes, which is the India route or the international route, and suddenly start to imbibe it and make it a part of their culture and their you know entire ecosystem. And that's truly when they will start to see a win in this space. But yeah, I think that's the difference. I yet find people asking me, so you are a charity? And I'm like, no, I'm a technology firm. So I think that realization is yet to come to India, that there is something beyond charity when it comes to people with disabilities.
And huge companies always have good amount of CSR. I don't know why they look at accessibility to a CSR. I really don't understand.
Yeah, I think it's something that none of us do. It's a mindset issue. It's a societal, uh, approach. So even if I think about it, if a customer, or actually if a company has, let's say, 10,000 customers, and if 15% of them have some form of a disability or an impairment, uh, what a huge customer base that we make. But we're ignored. I've always asked myself, I should be able to count these people. I haven't been able to count them. And there is really no way for us to count, people with disabilities in the world. But I think when I look at myself aging, right, I can automatically see now I need specs and I need bigger text than I did a couple of years back. I'm sure I'm going to be losing some of my hearing as I go old. So sometimes I hope that the elderly population and our own experiences as we age will help us realize what accessibility is. But I think if we wait that long, we'll wait a lot. So we need to address the younger generation. We need to address the developers. We need to talk to leadership, but have these people that are implementers actually learn accessibility and understand it. And I don't know, make it cool for them in some ways, if I could.
Shilpi, you only work for making things accessible in the point of view of a blind man, or it's about multi kind of disability. Like you also make things accessible for hearing impaired and stuff like that.
Yes. So the standard that we work towards is called the Web Content Accessibility Guideline. And the guideline basically covers people with all types of disabilities, whether learning, physical, deaf or hard of hearing, cognitive, all types of disabilities are covered. So there is something that will evaluate things for every type of disability. So we are, and actually technology should be agnostic to the person on the other side. It should work with anybody for any technology that they use. So if you are using a screen reader and using a website, it should work for you. If I'm using speech recognition, it should work for me. If somebody else is using an alternate keyboard, it should work for them. Um, or somebody is using even eye control, it should work for them. So I think the power of technology is truly when everybody can use it, and accessibility is to ensure that everyone can use the web equitably. And so we work for all types of disabilities, but yes, sometimes there is this myth that accessibility only helps blind, low vision, and visually impaired people.
Now, let's talk about empathy in the business. I want to ask you, Shilpi, what is the ratio of those businesses who come to you voluntarily? They themselves come to you and ask you to help them make their things, products accessible? Is there is any companies like that? Or it is all the time you have to go and approach them, teach them about accessibility, and then, spreading awareness and stuff like that, then convincing them to come to.
I think internationally, we do get customers who reach out and say we have to look at accessibility. Um, in India, the ask is very small at this point of time. All right. I think we are yet at the stage of building awareness. Um, but internationally, for sure, the ask is a lot more. And though we do have to build awareness, but it's not as much as we have to do within India.
So there are many verticals, like there is banking, because there is retail, there is security, there is telecom, healthcare. So what particular vertical which is widely not accessible, which needs immediate attention?
In India, finance, banking sector really needs to be accessible because you can't access your money. You can't. Yeah, that's the first thing about independence. Right, having financial independence, being able to transact for yourself, and I think the next, I would say today would be online commerce. Because the moment you can do these two things, there is so much that you can do which you otherwise couldn't.
The money speaks.
Yes, money speaks, and the moment you're buying power, everything's gonna work. So I think online commerce, the power of just my mother says it. She says, you all as the younger generation, you all are so lucky. You all can sit on your mobile phone and order anything in 5 minutes,
Correct.
and it'll come in the next 10 minutes. And she says, I can't do the same thing. I cannot do all of this. And I think that's the same feeling that people with disabilities have when they can't interact with a mobile app that can just get them milk at home without them having to go out. And I think that's for me, that's why online commerce and financial independence, because sometimes these online websites, you can't even access their payment gateway systems effectively. And so I think those two for me would be my first. And then I would go to things like education, because I think to even uplift people with disabilities, they need to have the same and equal education like everybody else so that they're not left behind. Right? Why should they not get the same opportunities like everybody else? Why should they stagnate in organizations and not have growth because people can't figure out where to put them next, or where should they? What is the area of focus for them? So I think education is my next after that.
Silpi, Team Suman versus Human salutes you for one thing. That is, you are not just trying to make, not trying actually, you are actually making things more and more accessible day by day for people with disabilities. Apart from that, you are also providing job opportunity to people with disabilities. You are one of the largest organizations within the country who is accommodating people with disabilities in your company as employees, right?
Yes.
I want to know more about it.
Well, at BarrierBreak, we believe that people with disabilities can do everything that anybody else can. They might need a little bit of support. So I'll give you an example. We take a large number of freshers, people with 1 to 2 years of experience, and teach them accessibility. Right? We teach them how to test websites and mobile apps. This includes people with disabilities also in the same, kind of, with the same kind of approach. Freshers with people with 2 years of experience. Most of them who come to us don't know technology at all. So we teach them technology, right? They learn to test. They become accessibility testers. Now, there might be a few things they might not be able to do. Like they can take a screenshot, no problem, but they might not be able to take a screenshot and mark out exactly where the problem is on the image, right? But for that, they have a colleague on their team, and that person will help support them and just mark that out for them. But they'll take the screenshot for themselves, right? But that marking might need some support. So in BarrierBreak, we have a term called, it's actually a process called support, right? And if we work with a person with disability and if they need some support, we can allocate some time for support. We actually don't bill our customers for support time. It's our cost,
Okay.
right? And we do that because do that. We'll always hear the statement people with disabilities can't do this.
Yeah.
Right? So sometimes it's that little that you have to do. It's not too much. It's that little that you have to do. I'll give you another example. We have a process when we make documents accessible. And most of these documents are made accessible for people with visual impairment, right? Like making an accessible PDF.
Yeah.
We all believe that the team that creates accessible PDFs for us is largely comprised of people who are deaf or hard of hearing.
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
Yes.
And that's the power of accessibility. You can all come together and do it. So I think everything can be taught to a person with disability, right? And we just have to sometimes tweak the process a little and build inclusion slightly differently.
In fact, you are creating a huge impact on these lives, right?
We're trying. We're trying. We wish we could do a lot more, but in the small 270 people that we are, we're not doing badly. But God willing, we will do more.
Shilpi, we have come to the stage where I have this question for all my guests on the show, and you will have no option to say no, you have to answer this. The
Sure.
question is here. Shilpi, if I give you all the superpowers in your hands to change something in this world, so what's that one particular thing?
What is it that I would change? Um, I would change people thinking that they can't succeed. I believe everybody can succeed, and that nagging feeling that people have at the back of their mind, I'm not good enough to do this. I wish I could take that away. I remember myself as a young kid, I was not as confident as I am today, someone. And I wish I had known that in my younger self, that trust in yourself and you can make it happen. I had a lot of self doubt because a lot of the disability sector thought I was doing something that was not needed, right? So I think have self belief. So I take away self doubt from the world if I could. How does that sound?
It was really fantastic talking to you, Shilpi Kapoor. Thank you so much for giving me this great opportunity to host you on my show.
Suman, the pleasure is all mine. I know I've been difficult to reach, but finally I made it to your show, and thank you so much for having me. It has been a pleasure talking to you.
My dear listeners, hope you enjoyed this show. Please let me know in the comments what do you think about this episode. Until then, take care. Goodbye.